It's added this new thing. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Chaz and Friends, episode 33. And I have the ever amazing Carlos and Yolanda from StoryTube. Uh,
Hello.
as I
Hello.
as I stated on the community post, you guys are two of my favorite Irish people. Like, I love watching your channel. It's been a real blast having you guys in the community. So I'm gonna turn it over to them to tell you a little bit about themselves and their channel, and then we're just gonna kind of chat and uh, you know feel free to chime in the comments. Grab a drink if you want one. I know I've got one, so we're just having a blast here.
Sláinte, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for having us on, Chaz. We've been chatting for quite a while, back and forth on comment sections and stuff. So it's nice to finally actually chat.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. As for who we are, we talk about books on the interwebs, and we found ourselves kind of in a fantasy corner of BookTube, a little bit, not necessarily by accident, but yeah, I guess a little bit by accident. Just because we were both reading a lot of fantasy at the time we discovered BookTube, but we go through phases with what we read and what we cover on the channel, just because I think we're readers of whatever. We have things that we like. Obviously, fantasy is very high up there, but we cover a lot of stuff on the channel. And yeah, I don't know what else.
The algorithm doesn't know what to do with us.
The algorithm has no idea where to put us. Yeah, yeah.
Hey, that's fair. You're definitely in the bookish algorithm, but as far as genres go, I'm kind of in the same boat, guys. I read a lot of fantasy, but I love mysteries, thrillers. Do a tiny bit of historical fiction. I've been branching into that a little bit. So
Yeah,
uh, you know, read what you love, right?
Yeah.
that's it. Just read books. Yeah, read
Yeah.
books.
Jenny's here. Hi, Jenny. Good to see you. She's not too far away from you guys. She's in Scotland. So, yeah.
Close enough.
Celtic sibling.
Celtic sibling, yes. And yeah, we were I don't know if she means she was 2 minutes late or we were, but yeah, we uh working out some technical difficulties. I think we got it right, guys.
Just
Yeah, we're
about.
good. We are good.
So I have to tell you guys, Yolanda, I have about, oh gosh, I think about 15 more chapters in Fool's Fate. Oh my gosh, I'm dying here. I am this series. This series I've just absolutely fallen in love with. The first trilogy was a little rocky for me. The first book was good. The second book was amazeballs. Assassin's Quest was kind of mid for me,
Yeah, I
but
think that's pretty common.
from there it's all been like solid like
Yeah,
fives. It's just been amazing. So
I was the same. I think there was enough that I loved in Assassin's Quest that I ended up still being very, very positive on the book, but I definitely had some lulls in it. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of questing when we know where we're going, because then I'm just like, just get there. Like, I know we're going to get there. But there's a lot in later books that make Assassin's Quest better, especially in like Rainwild Chronicles. So I'm kind of looking forward to eventually rereading it because I feel like it'll be a completely different experience.
yeah.
Um, yeah, but Fool's Fate is a great trilogy ender, I think.
hmm It seems like it so far, and I'm all up in my feels now because I'm like, on the one hand, I'm like, Fitz needs to think about preserving life, but then on the other hand, I'm worried about the fool, and I'm all up in my feels. So, Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Hob experience.
It really is. Yes. Yes.
You need to.
Jimmy says hello back.
I gotta read Hub. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like I can't do too many big fantasy series at one time. Probably just one at a time for me.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you had done you did Durfee's first book, right, Carlos?
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that
Yeah.
quite a bit. I haven't continued though. I tend to do that. I tend to read one book and then move on to a completely different thing, and then I don't come back to the series for quite a while. Which I've learned since joining BookTube is very weird, but to me is the most normal thing in the world. I don't know. Books don't all come out at the same time, so it's more normal for me to just jump from author to author. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm the same way actually, Carlos. I'll start a series and then I won't pick up the next book for a while, and at some point I'll get to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm invested enough that I just can't wait, and I'll keep reading. I'm that way with The Expanse now. I'm probably gonna just plow through The Expanse next year, and my friend Danielle and I have been buddy reading The Realm of the Elderlings, so we're doing one series per year. Is kind of how we're doing it right now. So we'll be doing Rain Wild next year.
Nice.
And
where are you at with The Expanse?
I will be starting Nemesis games this month. So I'm book 5. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nemesis games, things start blowing up.
Yes. I bet so. And I can't wait. This series has been great for me. I came to it after watching the show. So I was already invested in the characters and everything. And surprisingly, the show followed the books pretty much beat for beat. Yeah.
Yeah, I've only watched them. I think maybe the first season, but I watched it after reading a couple of the books.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of funny that the first season is basically half of the first book. Yeah. And there's only 6 seasons, but there's 9 books. So anyway, I'll probably finish the books before I ever go back to the the TV show.
I get that.
Yeah, I'm about to start book 7. Whatever that one's called, one of the big titles.
Is that Persepolis?
Persepolis Rising. That is exactly what it's called.
Yeah. Okay.
I see Jenny in the chat asking, blowing up figuratively or literally?
Right.
Quite literally. Yeah, quite literally.
Well, I'm excited. I know with book 7 that starts a whole other arc, right? Because it's like 30 years in the future or something like that.
There's a time jump, yeah.
Yeah. And I actually the first season did finish the entire first book. And from what I heard, the reason they did not continue beyond season 6 is because of the time jump. So he hinted that they may go back and do the other 3 books at some point. So
okay, right.
Give Holden a little bit of time to age, because he's still a fairly young guy. He's a fairly young actor. He's probably in his late 40s.
Yeah.
Give him time to age a bit.
Yeah, and he's a Hollywood guy, so like that's like 25 in dog years or whatever.
Right.
You know?
That's so true.
Just look at Paul Rudd. Paul Rudd is in his 50s, but
Paul Rudd is aging backwards.
He's like 23 in real human years.
He's Benjamin Button.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty well. There's a lot of Hollywood actors that you look at them and you're like, there's no way they're as old as they are. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like, I don't know. I mean, obviously they have all the money in the world for a great diet and like nutritionists and all that stuff. But I feel like plastic surgery has just gotten better. Like a lot more subtle, you know?
Yeah.
That's so true. I don't think you're a fake fantasy fan, Jenny. Lots of people have not even started the series yet. So, yeah. Yeah.
Right there with you.
Yeah.
I consider myself a
Yeah.
fantasy fan, but I have not read Robin Hood. I have not read Brandon Sanderson,
Mm.
Abercrombie.
Abercrombie, Joey Abs. Haven't read him. Plan to,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Abercrombie's fun. If I were to, and I'm probably gonna torque off a lot of people when I say this, but I would probably recommend doing Abercrombie before Sanderson. Just, I don't know. Sanderson's great, but you have to. There's so much time investment with Sanderson, and
that's true.
Abercrombie goes pretty quick.
Yeah. I mean, I think it might be a while before Sanderson. I don't know whether to finish the second half of Malazan before trying Sanderson, but I feel like Abercrombie is somebody that I can just throw in a book here and there.
Yeah.
And also, if I'm being completely honest, I just think I will like Abercrombie and more. Not that I won't like Sanderson, but I think I will like Abercrombie potentially more. It'll just do it for me, I suspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. I think you probably will, honestly. I like Sanderson. I've read the entire Cosmere at this point, so I'm just waiting on the fifth Stormlight book in December.
Cool.
But it was a lot of work to get there.
That's a lot of books, all right. And he writes like 5 a year.
Yeah, it's difficult to catch up.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I definitely recommend Abercrombie. He's got a real talent for creating voice for the characters.
That's one thing I really love in fiction in general, and things that I read, is distinct voice.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. I like something to be there, whether it's in the prose or in the dialogue. Some bit of personality,
Oh yes, yeah. He's Abercrombie has plenty of characters with personality.
Cool.
Have you read any Abercrombie, Yolanda?
Not really. I read about 200 pages of The Blade itself like 3 years ago and stopped because it was just not the right time. A lot was going on and I was just not like getting the headspace to focus on it. I did enjoy those 200 pages. At the time, I think we were pretty new to having discovered BookTube. Obviously, we didn't have a channel yet. And we were very new to this concept of grimdark, and I'd heard about grimdark in relation to Abercrombie, and I started reading it, and I was like, I was led to believe that this was bleak and nihilistic, and it's actually fucking hilarious.
Yeah, right.
Which now I've learned, like, a lot of grimdark seems to have that, like, kind of dark sense of humor.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did enjoy it. I'll get back to it. I think I just needed to give it enough time that I forgot about it completely so I could restart it and just read the trilogy. But yeah,
I tend to find I've sampled a little bit of grimdark here and there. At least with like Mark Lawrence and who else? I don't know, the Black Tongue Thief, or these kinds of books that get labeled online as grimdark. I tend to find that they make me laugh.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know whether grimdark is supposed to be comedic, but I certainly find them funny.
And then there's Baker.
And then there's Baker, yeah.
Oh,
but
Baker, yeah.
I find maybe the stuff that gets labeled grimdark is perhaps a little more honest and upfront about violence.
Yeah.
And everybody curses more.
Mm-hmm.
Well, curses at all. That's pretty much all I get out of that separation in those categories. But anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, Baker especially is really intense. I've only read the first I've only read The Darkness That Comes Before so
Yeah.
far, and he's the most intense grimdark that I've read, like as far as having a very dark and serious tone to it.
Yeah.
Um, George R. R. Martin typically gets put in the grimdark arena, and he's got a lot of lighthearted, witty banter and everything like in there too, but he's still a little bit more on the serious side. Joe Abercrombie,
Yeah.
when I was reading the books, I'm like, okay, I know this is grimdark, but it doesn't feel like it because it's almost a light and fluffy version of grimdark, which is weird to say.
Yeah. Yeah. It I think it probably lulls you in. I mean, me not having actually completed any of the books,
Yeah,
with a sense of like, oh, like the humor in it, and then I guess he makes bad things happen. But yeah, no, I agree. I think Baker is definitely the one that I've read that is the most unapologetically completely dark and
yeah,
bleak. Whereas even Mark Lawrence, well, I mean, Prince of Thorns and King of Thorns are exceptionally dark. But it feels very much like this is him doing an exercise in being really, really dark and doing
Yeah.
a first person narrator. And his other stuff isn't like that.
Yeah.
You've read his other stuff.
Yeah, I think obviously that's his grimdark series, but
Yeah.
I think even as the series progresses, even the latter half in Emperor of Thorns, it gets less and less grimdark, which I guess if you are using the definition of it having no hope or everything being ultra nihilistic, I don't know. I feel like I've yet to read something ultra nihilistic. Maybe Baker.
I don't know. We haven't read enough of it.
Yeah.
I think I'm not interested in reading something completely nihilistic, to be honest.
Yeah.
What's the point?
yeah. I definitely felt I definitely felt a very nihilistic bent with Baker, but again, like you said, I've only read the first book, so I haven't
Yeah.
continued on. And
Yeah.
that was one of those books where I had to it at the end of the book, I was like, what the hell did I just read? And so I went and I had to find a video series on YouTube to kind of walk through it before I fully understood the book. I'm like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. I had to ask people. It's like halfway through, and I was like, just a group of people that I knew had read, and I was like, "Hey guys, can you please like explain these concepts to me and like what's going on?" And they were like, "Oh yeah, this and this is actually the same thing," and I was like, "Oh." But I feel like whenever I get to book 2, it's been a year now since I read the first one. I'm going to have to watch some kind of recap or read a recap or something, because it's not just that he doesn't hold your hand, he shoves you into the
Yep.
abyss.
Right.
He
Yeah.
also gives you
Yeah.
like 7 names for one group of people and doesn't give you any indication that they're the same group of people he's talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one thing with Erickson, because Erickson, like, he'll throw you into the action, but eventually you figure everything out. At
Yeah.
least that's the way it was for me with Gardens of the Moon. But yeah, Baker, he's like, okay, have fun. I'll see you at the end of the book.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This is the thing. Like, I parked Baker at the time. I read, I don't know, 250 pages of the first book. Wasn't really in the mood, but I'll come back to it for sure. But I find since now I've read 5 Malazan books, and people talk about how confusing Malazan is. It's like reading, you know, I was gonna say a kid's book versus like Dostoevsky or something, but it's not that drastic. But I find like Baker way more confusing in terms of throwing you into whatever with all the terminology. And it's a typical fantasy thing, you know, you have to get used to the terminology and the world and the like rules of that, the in-world rules or whatever. but your exposure and just sitting with it over time helps you get through that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't find that there was any adjustment period for me with Malazan. Even with Gardens of the Moon, I was kind of right in. And I actually find if you read it slowly, he actually gives you a ton of information, just like blatantly.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you go back and like as you're reading, go back and flick to a previous chapter and then just flick through a page, you realize, oh, he's actually been giving me this information the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Baker, I found in those first couple hundred pages, was just throwing the kitchen sink at me. And yeah, I wasn't in the headspace at the time, but I'll get back to it for sure because I was enjoying it. It was very immersive.
Oh, the writing style is very immersive. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love the writing style for
Mhm.
sure. Yeah. Jenny says, I have all of Abercrombie and about 25 Sanderson, not read any of them yet. Can't justify starting a new series yet, but I'll buy them like a hoarder.
That
Thankfully,
is
I read
so
digitally.
relatable.
Nice.
Yeah, so relatable for me too. And I'm the same way. I read probably 90% on my Kindle. And so I've got like all of Baker's books on my Kindle. I've got just all of these series that I've got like 300 and some unread books on my Kindle, but I really need to get to.
It's a problem. You never catch up. We have an e-reader, but we mainly read physically, and space is running out. It actually, like, I've been noticing it's happened a few times. So we both work in a bookshop, and sometimes a customer will come up to the till with a stack of 5 books, and I'm like, oh, I own all of these. I haven't read any of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally relate. Elaine is here. Hi, good to see you. And we got Britton in the house.
Howdy.
Only 300. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Jenny
only,
got a
I was
lot
about to
more
say the
unread.
same thing. You only have 300 unread books on your TBR? What a try like 1,000.
Yeah. Oh, I've got more than that on my total TBR, but just on my Kindle, I've got 300 unread, but I've got way more than that total. Mona Lisa's here. Good to see you.
I think that's the life goal, is to have a never-ending TBR, right?
Yeah, just never
I
run out of
think
books.
so. Yeah. I guess if you finish your TBR, you haven't really lived. Is that how it goes?
Well, if you finish your TBR, you might as well just die. You know?
Right.
Life's done, you know?
That's not nihilistic at all. No one,
Put that on your tombstone.
Yeah.
right?
Put that on Joe Abercrombie's next book.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you know, it's true.
She'd take 1,000 too. Okay, that's funny. Yeah. I've got a lot, but and it just the beauty of booktube and having bookish friends is you keep adding more. Like with you guys, I've been either introduced to a bunch of new authors that I hadn't heard of, or reminded of authors that I wanted to try but just kind of forgotten about. Like Tana French is on that list. Like, I've been wanting to read her for many years, and I keep forgetting about her. And then I started watching your guys' channel. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to check her out. And then Dennis Lehane, and I love noir thrillers and stuff like that. So seems like Dennis Lehane is right up my alley. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
yeah, you guys have introduced me to some really great Irish authors, for one, which Lehane and Tana French both happen to be, and then, yeah, so that's the blessing and the curse of having bookish friends, right? Is you got a never-ending TBR.
It is a blessing and a curse. And we have the misfortune and the fortune of now also working in a bookshop, and everybody in there, the internet, like for me, works in pockets and in bubbles. So like we joined a bubble of readers on the internet that read sort of exclusively fantasy and maybe some science fiction, but like that genre stuff. Part of the reason we wanted to create a channel is like, where are all the people just reading like whatever,
Just
anything, like
Mhm.
where the readers like they just read books, because you have your literary fiction crowd on YouTube that read, they're probably literature students and they read the classics and all that kind of stuff. There aren't a huge amount of online people that just sort of read.
Mhm.
And we notice it in real life. Like my mother's a reader; she would pretty much read whatever. My dad tends to read a lot of the same kind of thing as you do. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that either. But working in the bookshop now as well, you really get to know some people that just, you tell them a book's good, they'll pick it up. And
Right.
I find that I have always been like that. You tell me a book's good, I'll just read it. I don't really care what genre, if it's genreless, if it's, got no plot or whatever. If it's good, I'll read it. And yeah, now working in the bookshop, the TBR has just been added to significantly. Like I don't tend to read a huge amount of nonfiction, but obviously working there now, you get to see what's big right now in nonfiction and what people are reading and what people are talking about, and you want to be informed. So like I've been reading some nonfiction the last while. And that's opening up a whole new corner that I haven't really explored since college. So yeah, it is a blessing and a curse. It's fortune and it's fortune.
Yeah, that's for sure. And that's cool, being able to work in a bookshop and branching out like that. Like I don't read a ton of nonfiction myself, but there's a few titles that are on my radar that I've wanted to watch, to read, and then usually I consume nonfiction on audio, because it feels like I'm listening to a podcast and it's just kind of easier to digest. But some I still read physically, and the TBR just grows. Like I can totally relate. Like we've got people. Elaine said she just did a thrift store shop, and new books being written all the time. There will always be books to add to the TBR. Yeah. And Jenny's at 3,800. Looks like.
Wow. That's impressive that you can count that.
Yeah, wow, you actually have a list of like an actual TBR. I always thought the TBR was like a figment of like a cloud somewhere. I don't track it really. I just have, I'll get to it. That's I also, before BookTube, didn't know what a TBR was.
Yeah.
Never actually said TBR. The only time I actually say TBR is when I say I don't know what a TBR is, and I don't really have one. It's just like, these are books I'd like to read. Yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah, that's fair, and I think that's a good way to approach it. Like even Britton here made a comment. A lot of genre labels are for marketing,
100%.
and yeah, same. And a lot of these terms that we use, like TBR and stuff like that, it's just technical speak for books we want to read. So yeah.
And then like marketing will appropriate the language that is being used online to talk about things. Like I think this is me purely from like being a bookseller and observing things, but like a big thing right now obviously is contemporary romance. That's a huge like commercial success, and there are books coming out now. There's a book literally called Enemies to Lovers. I'm like, that, how is that a book title? That's just a trope of romance that people were talking about on Tumblr 15 years ago, and now it's a book title, Or like there's like tropes like, oh, there's only one bed, and that's just a thing that happens in the book. And now they're like putting it on the back of the book as in this is the whole concept of the plot. And that's just marketing catching up, but like quite late with how people have been speaking for so long that now it's part of the vernacular when you talk about those kinds of books. And you see it with like words like unputdownable. That's not a word, and you see it all the time on blurbs now because it's now just a thing that people say. And I think that's with like TBR and DNF. Like DNF has become a verb, even though it's you know, like, oh, I DNF'd that, and like I never used to say that before.
You did not finish that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting. I guess that's like the evolution of a language just tied in with market, and then you just yeah,
it really is. I'm sure a lot of I mean, I'm sure like in like, you know, in Irish, I'm sure there have been a lot of words added over time to, you know, because of, you know, other languages and stuff, because you didn't have words for it back when Irish first came about, and then over time it's evolved, and English is the same way. I think English is the worst of those languages for doing that. We amalgamate everything.
Yeah, well, I think all languages kind of do that. Depends on what the dominant one is. Like, because Irish sort of left the everyday vernacular in this country probably 2 centuries ago. Well, not necessarily, not quite, maybe 150 years. All of modern technology, all those words are English words, even in the Irish language. So, yeah, I guess all languages kind of just take it from what's dominant. Latin infected everything.
It did, yep.
You know,
I think Irish is an interesting example because it's essentially like stuck in the mid 19th century, and then all these words for anything technological just doesn't exist. So you hear, and it's a language that's so different from English or any other really like Western language that you speak in Europe, and then you hear it on like a public transport, for example, and you can't understand anything, and then suddenly there's a word where you're like,
that's just English.
That's just English, but like pronounced slightly differently, and it's just a word that doesn't exist because there's no Irish word for like elevator or something like that.
Right.
It's so they either take the English word or they just use a description for it. So it's actually a really interesting example of that. Also, Spanish in South America has a lot more English words incorporated into it. Spain Spanish doesn't really do.
A lot of Americanized Spanish in South America.
Very interesting. I've always been fascinated with languages and how they evolve, and then now we're just like adding new things that wouldn't have really been words to the language.
The internet is accelerating that because we're all globally, I guess, seeing the same language, so it's just happening a lot faster.
Social media, especially.
Like you hear things even like two young Irish people talking to each other, and they're saying words that no Irish person would have used 10 years ago because, like, maybe it's an Americanism, but because of social media, it's now just global. I find that so interesting.
Yeah, we've got a lot more American slang in our everyday vernacular here now just because of social media. Because like the English-speaking world, you go on the internet, you're seeing American media pretty much, like constantly. So that language is, or the context for how you use certain words or whatever, it's very Americanized these days.
Yeah, for sure. And like on the, we were talking about genre labels and everything like that. That reminded me of one of my favorite videos that you guys did on breaking down the mystery genre and like, mystery, thriller, how they combine, where they diverge, and everything.
Yeah.
That video, we're in a time and place and culture where a video like that is extremely necessary because of all the genres and subgenres that are prevalent. And that video was huge for me, seeing you guys break all that down. You did a lot of research into it and a lot of work. And if anybody's watching and has not watched that video, I highly recommend it. I just again, thank you guys so much for creating that, because I'm a huge fan of mysteries, whether it's cozy mystery or mystery thriller, or
Yeah, that was a fun one to make. Because obviously, like I said earlier, we joined BookTube in a time where we were reading a lot of fantasy, so we sort of fell into the fantasy corner. But we just read books, and it always pained me that not a huge amount of people on YouTube, at least in BookTube, talked about crime fiction. That even, fantasy readers obviously experience some genre snobbery from the literary crowd, but like crime readers experience the same snobbery from the fantasy crowd. And then the crime crowd also give it back to the sci-fi crowd.
Everybody's snobber. Yeah,
I don't understand why anybody needs to be snobby with any other genre, but yeah, that one was fun to make, because even people who maybe do read that kind of thing, or would pick up those kinds of books, might have certain preconceived notions about, oh well, I don't want to read something that my dad reads or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We just wanted to demonstrate that the genre is actually extremely broad,
Mm-hmm.
and you can find books that are very, very different from each other. An Agatha Christie murder mystery is, while maybe in its foundations similar to a Tana French book, they are polar opposites.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was a fun one to make, and it also kind of helps you figure out where your own tastes lie when you make those videos.
Yeah. It also comes from years of us having conversations about this, because going, I think, generally into bookshops, but specifically where we work now, where we used to go as customers before, and they have a crime section and it's just called crime, but you pull out a random book and you're like, there's no crime being committed in this book. This is a spy thriller. So it was just a crime and thriller section, but they just called it crime as an umbrella term, which is something that just happens a lot. But then there's confusion with all the terms being used interchangeably, but they're not the same. So we were just like, let's see if there's actually a foundation here. Like, is there a definition for all of these? Like, what does that look like, and what are the differences, and what are the tropes of each one? And obviously they overlap a ton.
And also, we're not authorities on this. We just decided to make a video saying what we think. And I think sometimes somebody has the, for lack of a better word, balls to go out and make a video and post it on the internet. People watching it might then, you have this subconscious thing of like, oh, well, here's an authority on this.
Right.
I'm going to take their word for it. So just disclaimer, we're not like authority figures on it, but we books. We read books.
Well, you started the conversation, and I think that's important. Or whether you started it or not, but you made a significant waypoint in the conversation that I think is helpful. Whether or not other people break it down differently or whatnot, you engaged in the conversation. You actually put it out there, which not a lot of people are comfortable doing. So I applaud you for it.
Thank you. That's cool. I'm glad, because we were aiming to just try to make it more accessible, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also I think our favorite videos to do are the monthly wrap-ups, just because it also highlights our reading tastes, and how 1 month to the next is not really always going to be the same or very predictable necessarily.
Right.
For us, and that also represents a large portion of the readership in the world, I guess.
Mhm.
Just, oh, what are you going to read this month? I don't really know. Yeah, I think we kind of actively sort of try to butt against the here's my TBR for next month, and it's going to be Sanderson, Abercrombie, and Wahab or whatever,
Mhm.
which is great. We read those too. But yeah, I guess just a little bit of variety,
Yeah.
Yeah. I also like, I find it extremely impressive when people say, next month I'm going to read these 5 books, and then they go ahead and they read those 5 books.
Oh, so
and
impressive.
I understand, like, from a viewer perspective, and I can include myself, that is really satisfying because you can rely, and then you're excited and you're like, oh, I want to see what this person thinks about these books. I could never, because I will say, yeah, I'll read these 5 books, and then I proceed to read half of one of them, drop it, and read something completely different in a different genre.
I can't say on the channel I'm going to do something because I know I'm not going to do it. I'm like,
nope.
I'll be like, oh, I'll get halfway through it, and then my mind will go to something else, and I'll read that, and then my mind will go somewhere else, and I'll read that. So it's nice to just do the wrap-ups and be like, you sit down and you're like, oh, okay, so this last month I've been on quite a trip, and
Right.
yeah, and every month that way is a bit of a trip.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I've gotten into that debacle where I've said, I'm going to read these books, and then I don't read those books, and all right. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, and sometimes I'll read completely different books, and I it happens, and so yeah, it's probably better to do it that way. And I do love your monthly wrap ups because, like you said, it showcases a wide variety of books and stuff, and seems like there's not not a lot of people are opposed to that either. You like what you like, and they enjoy hearing it, and I know I do. And I know Elaine was saying here, one of her viewers describes the channel like walking through an old bookstore. She reads a wide range of fiction and nonfiction, and
that is a lovely description.
That's a great way to describe it. Yeah, I think that's a cool goal for any channel, really. I think it's a good thing for BookTube to be, is like, here's my sort of virtual bookstore. It's exactly how we all find it in the first place. You go and you're reading whatever, you want to look for a review, you want to look for other recommendations that are similar, you go to YouTube. I'd say a lot of people discovered BookTube pre or post 2020.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that time where we were all sort of sitting at home. Okay, what do I read next? You go online because you can't go to the bookshop. It's a good place for it.
It is, yeah. I first started watching some BookTube videos here and there in 2018, and then I'm like, oh,
Right.
hey, I could do this. So I started my channel in 2019, and then I think 2020 and beyond is when it really blew up. It's like, you see these, they call it the new class, or the new, the
Oh, yeah.
second, the new first year booktubers who all blew up, and like,
Yeah.
Philip Chase hit like 20,000 subscribers, and like,
The class of 2020 or whatever, was it?
Yeah, pretty wild. But yeah.
I think I discovered it around 2020, 2021.
It was 2021.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we were still at home.
Yeah.
In 2021. Yeah.
So Usman says he knows you guys.
Hey, Usman.
Good to see you, man. Yeah. My Kindle tells me how many are read or unread. Yeah. I went through and did that with mine recently. That's how I found out how shamefully how many I have left. But that's the thing too. There was a point where you make all these goals, and then if you don't complete them, you feel bad. And it's like, if we didn't make those goals, we wouldn't feel bad about it.
Yes.
100%.
Absolutely. And I think that's sometimes a tricky line to walk when you decide to put yourself out there on the internet and have a channel. And it's a super fun thing to do, but it's so easy to fall into a trap of, you get excited on a wrap up video and you say, oh, I'm going to read the second and the third one next month. And then suddenly you're like, actually, I'm in the mood for whatever, a classic sci-fi. I'm not going to do that. And then you feel bad, or you feel bad because you're doing a wrap up and you've only read 2 books because life happened, and then you feel like, oh, I don't have enough content to actually make a video, and all of these things. But like you said, it's all self-imposed. Like, nobody's going to come and punch you in the face because you read less books than you said you were going to read.
Right.
Also, if you like, it sounds like we're bashing people that make TBRs, possibly.
Oh, no,
but like,
not at all.
Oh yeah, not at all.
Like, if you do that and it works for you, that's really, really cool, and I kind of envy it. But I think my brain is way too scattered, and just life is fucking scattered as well. So like, I can't.
Life really is. I completely agree. It's yeah, and I'm kind of in between. Like, I'll do a TBR, but I try not to stress out about it. But some people really need that structure, and so they have an official TBR, and that's great. But yeah, life gets really awful sometimes. It gets really hairy, and you just can't keep up.
Yeah, and the last thing you need sometimes is to just add an extra pressure with something that is supposed to be an outlet for fun and enjoyment and just joy. So it shouldn't become a pressure. Like, making TBRs can be really fun. I do them. I just won't share them publicly because I do not follow them. I make them constantly. Yeah. And then it's fun to, like, 6 months later say, hey, did I actually read all these books before the end of the year? No, I read 2 of them.
Well, part of the fun for us of, like, part of the, like, hobby of reading is sitting down in front of the bookshelves that we have, picking out a little stack that's calling to us, and then going, maybe this one first. And then you read a chapter, and then you pick up another one, you read a chapter of that, and then whichever one you read more of, maybe that's the one that captures your attention, and that'll be your read. I tend to read a couple of things at the same time, but I go through phases of focusing on one and then reading another one, or maybe I have 2 completely different books to counterbalance. Like right now, I'm reading A Star Called Henry by Roddy Doyle, which is Irish contemporary fiction, or it's basically a historical fiction.
Cool.
And
then I'm also reading The End of Everything by Katie Mack, or The End of Everything, Astrophysically Speaking. And it's a book on astrophysics, but it's about, like, the various ways the universe will end and why that's kind of cool. Completely different from each other. And when I feel like I've read my fill of one for a day, I'll just move over and read a chapter of the other, and I kind of go back and forth. But that process of sitting down in front of the shelves and just sort of, flipping through and grabbing 5 and then picking up one, it's part of the joy for me, I think for both of us. So yeah, strict TBRs are definitely not the way. And I think sometimes since we've come on to BookTube, especially, and like joined Discords, you want to read books with people, so you schedule buddy reads, and then we add that on top of, like, doing our month of tribute video months, where we're like, okay, so in that month we're going to read a bunch of books for our friend Evie, and then it comes around to the month where we read books for Evie, and I'm like, okay, so the one book I said I was going to read, I've picked it up and I realize I'm not in the mood. Right. Now I'm stressed.
Yeah, you weren't quite ready for the spear to cut through water, and that's okay.
I wasn't. Yeah. There was way too much shit happening last month. That wasn't happening. But it's fine. But then you quickly realize you're like, okay, well, I don't need to put pressure on myself. I'll just, you know.
She likes other books.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's good to be flexible with yourself. I've done something similar, Carlos, where I've done a couple of rounds of speed dating my physical books. So, I'll
Yeah.
get a stack of like 10 books and I'll read the first like couple of paragraphs and see which one grabs me. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of fun. I might do that again at some point. But
Yeah.
That could be a fun idea for a video, actually.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
a good idea.
Yeah, in fact, I did it for a video twice, and
Cool.
that was interesting. Yeah, to find out which one I picked and which one really grabbed me and pulled me in. So,
kind of is that a new way to do a TBR video on book 2, perhaps?
Oh yeah, maybe. Speed dating video.
Books, speed dating, my TBR. Nice. Yeah. That's
This is interesting. Britton says he said on Chatting with Nuts, we've been seeing more fluidity between genre and literary books too. That's very true, especially with Guy Gabriel Kay. I feel like he really walks that line between literary and genre fiction, like literary fantasy.
I think there's more of that. There has always been more of that than maybe people think. It's just what marketing decides to push something as. Because I don't think many authors actually set out to say, well, I'm going to write this specific kind of book. They maybe just to find their way to it. Now, obviously, if you're, a fantasy writer writing traditional fantasy, like a John Gwynne, he sets out, he knows he wants to write a fantasy book. That happens, of course. But yeah, I find even someone like Guy Gabriel Kay probably knew he wanted to write a fantasy book. He also wants to bring in some history to it. He wants to flex that purple prose muscle.
Yeah.
So it finds its own way. I don't know if. Oh, we have a device talking to us.
I think Bill was
that kind of thing, I think, is perpetuated by marketing. And I think if you look at a lot of books more closely, you'll see that there is a lot more blending going on, or fluidity between literary and genre, or even between what we perceive as two genres together. Like I was thinking recently, when we were filming the crime mystery thriller breakdown, there are quite a few fantasy books that have a lot of crime or thriller in them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. For sure. The Expanse is one of those. It started off with a really strong crime noir setting. I recently read The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett.
Oh, I've heard that. Yeah.
It's excellent, and it's got a really strong permeation of crime noir throughout. Combined with like a lot of plants and fungus and everything. Like I called it botany punk because it's kind of like, so it's a genre bender as well. So
cool.
Yeah.
It's funny to see then as well, like in the literary circles, when you see some bit of taken from another genre, but it's being respected by the literati. It's funny actually. The shortlist for the Booker Prize came out recently, and there's a sci-fi book in there, but of course it's philosophical science fiction, so it's important. But there's a spy thriller in there, Creation Lake by Rachel Kushner. But it's being marketed as fiction, like just general literary fiction.
But so is Orbital. Orbital it's about astronauts on a space station, but it's it's fiction. It's marketed as literary fiction because it's not about space. It's about them reflecting about Earth, about life and death and whatnot. Whereas last year I think it was only longlisted in Ascension, which is
Martin
a
McCain's
science fiction book and was marketed as such.
Yeah.
However, the book that went on to win,
Prophet Song.
Prophet Song by Paul Lynch, is a dystopia.
Mhm.
Again, marketed as fiction, at least here.
Yeah.
Because it's literary and it won the Booker. That's interesting.
Mhm.
Which is
Yeah.
also fine, like it, because the books will focus on a certain thing, like maybe the focus is more on the writing or on the underlying whatever, but I think that creates a perception that all genre fiction doesn't have that, which I think is incorrect. Because to say somebody like Guy Gavriel Kay or whoever it may be, Stephen Erickson, to say that they don't focus on their art, they just focus on the fantastical, that the focus is the plot or the focus is, that's kind of just incorrect.
Yeah.
I also see a comment there from Britain, like authors like Salman Rushdie and Atwood, who are embarrassed to admit that they write, fantastical things, which is interesting in itself. But like that was almost the foundation of literature itself, is writing about the fantastical, myth, and
absolutely, like so much of it comes from mythology. Shakespeare, A Midsummer Night's Dream, that's fantasy.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's so many crossovers on a lot of the stories we love. Like one of my favorite novels is Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. I never thought I would like something like that, but as I was reading it, I'm like, oh, there's definitely some supernatural stuff going on in here. Like, just and that's a shame. I don't feel like authors should be embarrassed about that. It's just
absolutely,
our stories form the way they form. So yeah,
I think I think readers are also perceptive enough to pick up when an author is setting out to write something for commercial reasons versus writing just a book that they want to enjoy writing. And it can even happen with something you might perceive to be like commercial.
Right.
Maybe that author just wants to comment on something that is quite similar and do it in their own way, bring in their own little cultural background or how they were brought up or some tiny element of what it means to be human. With all this window dressing, I think it's actually kind of, in some cases, more skillful to write something profound with literary merit, with a lot of window dressing of genre built around it, than just write the thing. But there's a good bit of literary fiction that falls into that trap of, I'm going to write about something important and I'm going to do it seriously, and the writing is going to feel heavy, but it's just that, and it's not actually as skillful as people maybe think it is. That's just my opinion, though.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think that's a great perspective to have. By the way, Bad as Rad says hi. Hi, Bad. I wanted to draw attention to this one right here. StoryTube has culturally enriched me, at least reading wise. Yeah, because I think a lot of good literature, no matter what genre it maybe fits into, is culturally aware too, for the specific culture it's coming from, or just culture in general. So that comment really stuck out to me. And just a side note, everybody, I probably won't get to all the comments, but I'm seeing all your comments, and I appreciate you. Just wanted to let you know that I'll get to your comment if I can, and if I can't, just know I love you, and we're just having a good time talking. So, but
that's a great point though as well, because you can have two books that are superficially vastly different. They could be completely different genres. One of them could be literary fiction, one of them could be genre fiction. They could be completely different plots.
Yeah.
But if the author writing it had a similar upbringing, has the same culture, is from the same place, the same gender, race, ethnicity, whatever it is, religion, those things will seep into those books, and they might end up propping up very similar values, even if the book superficially reads completely differently. So you get, whereas you might read two pieces of genre fiction, but the authors are from opposite sides of the globe, and you'll get something very different out of them. So yeah, for sure, absolutely, genre is not the only difference that you can get. Yeah, which is like, I like trying to read more fiction in translation. And sometimes it's difficult to get, especially in genre fiction, because I feel like, I don't know if it doesn't get translated as much, but you get a lot of like, oh, this is a fantasy that's inspired by a different culture that isn't like medieval Europe. How exciting. And then you look, and the author
is American.
Is actually American. And it's just like, okay, I mean, it's fine. It's still cool that they're inspired by something different. I'll still be interested in reading it. I'm like, give me somebody who's like actually born and raised, I don't know, in Southeast Asia or wherever, in North Africa, or, you know, just a different place. And sometimes it's hard, and then you're like, oh no, but it's still written in English, and, you know, like, oh, give me something more obscure.
Which, as well, to be fair, like, it also doesn't take away the merit of somebody who maybe has dual cultural heritage, because
absolutely,
we are both people with dual cultural heritage. And if we were to write something in English, it's still going to be influenced by Spanish culture, by German culture, whatever upbringing that is.
Of course, yeah.
Or but even, yeah, like sometimes you want to maybe, and I think it's a way of thinking that comes from probably reading broadly as well. Like, so you walk into a bookshop and I'm like, okay, I want to read something from, I don't know, Palestine, and I'll look in the fiction section. I'll look around. There might be a table of translated fiction, and it's helpful then to find that stuff. But you do that for quite a lot of genre fiction, maybe, and it's more difficult to find within genre fiction, that kind of thing. But fantasy is, I think, leading the charge in that sense. Certainly,
we are seeing a lot of cultural diversity in authors within the genre. Yeah.
It's an exciting time to be keeping an eye on new releases in fantasy. And I think in science fiction, due to probably the success of Three Body Problem, we're seeing a lot of specifically Asian authors and being translated into Western languages, which is also really cool to see, because that's we both read Three Body Problem earlier this year, and it did feel different from reading something Western.
Sure. Yeah, it really did. Yeah, I quite enjoyed Three Body Problem. I thought it was a fantastic book. And I haven't finished the series yet, but I definitely want to. And I thought I don't know how much of Cixin Liu's voice comes through in the translation, but I'm assuming it largely does. And of course, I know the translators are Chinese as well, so Chinese Americans and whatnot. So I was really impressed with that story. It's a tough read, but it's worth every moment. So
and you also kind of look at it through a different lens as well. Like, you don't necessarily judge it by Western standards of storytelling. Which is it's just a cool reading exercise. And whether you end up liking it or not is completely separate to that kind of appreciation, you know?
Yeah, that's very true. And it was interesting for me too, because most most books that you read that talk about like the Cold War era and different things like that, and communism comes from a Russian, they take it from a Russian cultural perspective, and it was really neat to see a focus on communist China for
Yeah,
that one,
yeah.
and get that perspective. And yeah, I felt like that really enhanced my perspective as a reader reading that book.
Yeah.
That's kind of all you want from a book, really, as well.
Hmm.
And if it did just that at a minimum, it's a success.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Elaine says, I have themes, but even then I read other books. I go by mood, interest, and tie into what I just read. Okay. All right. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
sometimes I like doing that. Like if we're going into October, like, okay, so I'd like to read some horror. Not gonna hold myself strictly to just reading horror because I don't read a ton of horror anyway. But maybe if I feel like reading a fantasy, I might read a darker one, or if I feel like
Yeah.
reading a thriller, I'll read a serious one, that kind of thing.
yeah.
Which is like a vague theme without being too strict about it. That can work. That can also be fun to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that can. Yeah, reading across a theme is definitely something I have not done much of, and it would probably help me to kind of branch out and tickle those waters.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think sometimes I do it without realizing, just because I'm in a certain mood, and then I notice it when we're talking in the wrap up. I'm like, oh, I talked about 3 books in a row about dysfunctional families. What was going on here? Not intentional, but here we are. Sometimes that happens. You're just picking up one book after the other as a mood reader, and then suddenly you look back and there's a through line.
Yeah, and that mood can be kind of imperceptible at the time. Like I lost my job earlier in the year, and I ended up reading a ton of books that were very sort of angry at capitalism, but I didn't realize that I was gravitating towards those books, and clearly they were speaking to me.
But they were
Mhm.
quite different from each other. But you were reading a combination of like books about appreciating the little things and what's really important, and then like, oh, the system is broken, and like all these different. I was like, oh, this is.
There's a through line. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, uh it's funny, like even in countries where capitalism isn't really big, there's still pockets of capitalist influence, and you
Oh
know
yeah.
how the job market operates and everything like that. Yeah, it's crazy. It's really crazy. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm glad that you got this. So you're temporary at the bookstore, right? And then you've got a new job that's coming up.
Yeah, well, I didn't think that I would be there for such a short time. I was kind of thinking, right, well, at least into 2025 in there, but yeah, just one of the jobs I had applied to months ago just got back to me, so I
Mhm.
could not turn it down.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Still got a
Yeah,
couple of months of the bookshop, a nice little mental
a nice
break.
mental break from the yeah.
yeah. Oh, that's excellent. And sometimes that's what you need. That's really good to have in between jobs, to
Oh
have
yeah,
that mental
for
break
sure.
and do something different, that you enjoy. You're around books all day.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been great. It's been uh, stressful for our shelves and wallets,
Yes.
but hey, 50% discount we get, so It's not too
Yeah,
bad.
It's
can't
also
beat
just
that.
like we get like the shop gets arcs sent from publishers all the time, and they end up in the canteen and they're free for all for people to grab. And so like we come home with free books all the time on top of all the books that we're buying, and it's just
Yeah.
it's not sustainable. We don't have enough space.
Sometimes publishers will send us free copies of books they want to push, or there's a marketing push for. And if I'm in the basement with a delivery coming in and we see the books coming in and there's 3 free copies, the lads in the basement are gonna snatch those before they even make it to the shop floor. So like yesterday, I came home with a free hardcover of a new history book about the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Beautiful book.
Wow.
And we only had 3 copies in. Oh my God.
That's your phone.
There's a phone talking.
It's your phone.
Can you hear that?
Yeah, I could hear it a little bit. Yeah.
Anyway, so we got 3 copies of this thing in yesterday, and they were like, "Oh, it's from the publisher. They want to do a marketing push for it. They want us to make it like the history book of the month next month." And I was like, so basically, in the eyes of the world, these books don't necessarily exist. We should all take one. So we did.
Well, that's awesome. That's a cool way to get something that's new and fresh that not everybody has read yet, and maybe not everybody will read, but you will have read it at some point. Yeah, that's awesome. Elaine said goodbye. She's off to ancient Egypt and reading the Orion mystery. Oh,
enjoy.
Nice.
Yeah. I've heard the 3-body problem isn't deep with character development, but the plot is amazing. Is that true? Yeah, it's not deep with characters at all. It's very concept driven.
Yeah.
At least that was my experience of it. The concepts are what drive the book more than anything.
It is. It's concept driven and it's society driven. So it's more interested in how does a society react to these things than it is in how do individuals react to these things, which is also a very cultural thing that it took me a little while into the book to be like, oh, this is what's going on here.
Yeah.
But yeah, if like there's no, I guess what we have learned to expect from following a character with like a close third person POV, that like we get their inner thoughts and emotional like turmoil and whatnot, like that's not really there. I think there was one character that gets a little bit more depth. I can't remember her name.
I can't remember her name either, but I know exactly who
you know.
Ye Wen-Jie.
There you go.
Ye Wen-Jie. Yeah, because she was the one that got hired by the outpost and everything, and her dad was like the big the outspoken revolutionary against the communist regime and stuff, and yeah. I think you're right. Yeah, we did get quite a bit on her and get to know her better than probably most of the characters.
Yeah, I thought she was interesting as a character. Other than that, I wouldn't call any other characters interesting. They're just kind of functional. But yeah, the concepts are interesting.
Yeah,
I think it focuses a lot on humanity's reaction to the situation.
I can see that. I would agree for sure. Yeah, and it's a very it's a very true reaction that anybody in any culture would have. I think that's the beauty of it. Even though it's kind of set in that Chinese culture, I don't think their reaction is any different than any one of us would have in that situation.
Yeah, pure fear and dread.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it really kind of drives home that the fact that, we're we're all the same. We're all part of this human race. We just happen to live in different parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But we also we all have the same hate, fears, loves, yeah, everything. I think it was, yeah, it really spoke to me on that level for sure.
Mm. That's probably why, or one of the reasons, I suppose, that it's so successful globally, even though it is very steeped in like the Chinese Cultural Revolution and like the
Right.
backdrop of that, but it's still a very universal. I guess it taps into a universal fear or curiosity, or both.
Mhm. Right. And I'm sure it attracted a lot of scholarly readers as well, because because the titles are common philosophical backdrops in science and everything. That, like, when I
Yeah.
first saw the book, I'm like, what in the world is the three body problem? And then I
Yeah.
looked it up, and the same with the dark forest. It's a scientific philosophical concept
Mm-hmm.
that I never heard of, because I don't play in those spaces, but I'm sure it attracted a lot of uh, scientists as well to kind of read the book and experience it and see what it was talking about. So
It's quite common as well, I think, for sci-fi authors, at least those that write in the sort of harder sphere, to be scientifically driven,
yes.
scientifically inclined, for sure. Even just thinking of like Adrian Tchaikovsky, who can spin a damn good yarn, has a background in like zoology or something like that, and
Oh
is very
yeah, I heard
he's
that.
very
Yeah,
focused on animals and that sort of the science behind that, and it kind of comes out in his books for sure.
yeah. Um, Pretty normal for a lot of concept-driven sci-fi. It's not better or worse, just a different style. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see. I know a lot of people that I've encountered who are very strictly character-driven readers that did not finish the book or have no plans to go back and read the rest of the series. And yeah, yeah, if you're really strongly driven by character development, you're not gonna it may not be the series for you.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
I see.
yeah.
I see his commentary. There's a lot of specific mentions of Arthur C. Clarke in the book.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's right, there is. I forgot that. Yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah, yeah, because Clark was kind of like that too.
Mhm.
More concept driven, whereas Asimov is more plot driven. Asimov really isn't character driven either per se. Uh,
No, I don't think people really read Asimov for his characters.
yeah.
Yeah, I find Foundation very, very dry.
Hmm.
That's one I kind of bounced off. I like his robot stories.
Okay, yeah. I need to read. I need to go back and read those. I read I, Robot way back in the day, but it was probably 2 decades ago. So I need to go back and reread and give it another shot. What have you watched the Foundation series on Apple TV?
I think we watched like the first episode.
Yeah, maybe one or two, maybe. I don't know. It was a bit
It looked great.
looked amazing,
Oh
production
yeah.
value off the chain, but I don't know. I felt a little bit. If it left me feeling a bit cold, like I don't care. Kind
Hmm.
of exactly like the book, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I think what I love about the TV show is it does a lot of necessary gap filling.
Okay.
Mm.
You know, the book were, well, I only read the first book so far, but the book was very, very bare bones. And I think the show did a good job of filling out the and everything to make it palatable for a visual audience. And I really enjoyed it. I've watched both of the 2 seasons so far, and I think they're going to do the third season as well, based on, I guess, is it Second Foundation?
Yeah.
But yeah, so they're supposedly completing the trilogy on the show, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I
Cool.
think
Maybe
they
we'll
made
give
some
it another
interesting
go.
Yeah.
choices.
We only watched one episode.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to give the show
Yeah.
a proper bash.
Yeah. 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 We don't want to give too many spoilers away here, but yeah. um,
That's
yeah.
the oh shit moment. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The oh shit moment. Oh, this is really real now. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Um, found Foundation probably. Oh, I read Foundation probably 10 years ago and remember enjoying it. I also know that I didn't have any taste 10 years ago. That's funny. I like that.
You know, it is probably also, at least for the robot stories, it's probably almost 20 years since I read those too. Like, I probably read those when I was 9 or 10. So, I mean, I say I enjoyed them, so I have no idea, actually. A long
Yeah.
time ago.
There's no aliens in the Foundation show. I think some Okie dude was talking about Three Body Problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no aliens in the Foundation show unless, well, I won't spoil anything, but unless you count robots. But yeah, I I like the whole conversation that these stories tried to have around the integration of artificial intelligence with sentient intelligence.
Yeah.
And I think that line is going to be blurred more and more as we go, as technology gets better. It's kind of scary, but also
Yeah.
kind of cool. It's almost like it redefines what it means to exist.
So I have
like
a recommendation. I have a
Yeah.
recommendation for you, a nonfiction that admittedly I have not yet read myself. But I really want to. It is by Yuval Noah Harari. It's called Nexus.
I've heard of the author.
They also wrote Sapiens, which is
A History of Humankind.
yeah.
So this
That's the one I've heard of. Is Sapiens? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Nexus is his brand new book. It just came out like a month or so ago. And we're seeing a lot of it in work. But I really want to read it. It's about the history of information from like, the dawn of humanity to AI, basically.
Okay.
And that just sounds like a very, very interesting thing to explore culturally, socially, scientifically.
Also just very timely, since we're
timely.
seeing a lot of developments in AI that I frankly find mostly concerning more than exciting.
Yeah.
I agree.
Hopefully we'll be proven wrong, but I don't know.
Yeah. If science fiction novels are any indication, and I think they are good indications. You've got stuff like HAL, you've got stuff like the robots and things like that. It tends to be a very negative picture of what that can be. One series I read recently was Scythe by Neil Shusterman,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
I wanted to read that actually.
that series presents AI in a very positive light of a potential future that we could see with AI, where it eradicates eradicates disease and eradicates uh, uh, you know cultural boundaries and everything like that. It eradicates the things that separate us and keep us from living our truest life. And it's a really interesting concept that I really loved.
Yeah.
So, but that's one of the few stories I've seen where technology and artificial intelligence is mostly presented in a positive light. There were definitely some negatives.
Yeah.
I think it's also because science fiction in general has a lot of cautionary tales. It's a big
Yeah.
factor in science fiction, so they will skew. If we follow this path, we're doomed.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I think a bit of balance is nice.
It's an interesting one because like every technological development has the potential for great good.
Yeah.
And so does AI. However, it's all about how do we choose to use it. And the problem is that we live in a world that is so extremely profit driven that it's all about what's going to be funded, and whatever is potentially most profitable is what's going to be funded.
That's why we haven't been back to the moon.
Yeah, which is why, like, I would love to believe that AI is going to be used to help prevent cancer. Unfortunately, I think we're just going to squash the arts first, and that sucks.
Yeah, that's my fear as well, Yolanda, is that we're going to that we're going to have progress at the expense of individual artistic creativity, and that is unfortunate. I hope I'm wrong.
I hope so.
It's also not the AI or technology itself. Like it's humans corrupting it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So
exactly.
like the problem will always just come back to us,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And eventually, the AI that gets created in a lot of stories, the AI realizes that humans are the problem and decides, oh, well, it's time to exterminate humans then. And it's that vicious cycle. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Samwise has a good comment here. Why do you think some books we read 10 years ago just leave us with a good feeling and not much else, and others from the time we can remember vividly in detail?
I think it depends what you get out of it.
Yeah, it's a good question, because sometimes I wonder that, because there are books that 6 months after reading them you remember nothing about, but you just remember you had a good time.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's others that you read 10 years ago and you still remember plot details. And I think
depends how closely you read them, what was going on in your life.
It does. Like, for me, it definitely depends on how I read it. Like, I find that I tend to remember audio less.
Same.
I think, what's going on in your life and like definitely plays a factor, I think. But I think it's also a credit to the book if it's memorable. Like, it can be great in the moment and then just like evaporate. And that doesn't take away from the fact that it was great in the moment. But if it's memorable, I think that's an extra credit to it. Like, there was clearly something that either connected on some kind of personal level that made you remember it, or it's just, I don't know, it had something. What is that something? I don't know. I think that can vary, but
yeah, probably different for everybody what that something is, right? And he kind of followed up on that and says, does it depend on the author of where we're at, or how good of a reader we are or were? I think probably yes to all of it. Yeah, in some respect. Yeah. Yeah. We all come.
what you
different
get out
stages.
of I think what you get out of a book changes over time as well, or you just start to realize it the more you read.
Mhm.
And like, I don't know, there's books I read, 10, 15 years ago that still stick with me. And then there are the large quantity that I don't remember really, but I kind of know it was in that sphere. I don't think that will change 15 years from now either.
Yeah.
You know, I think those the ones that stand the test of time. It doesn't necessarily make them better books. It just means they tapped into something or it did something or yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also some books. It depends what the focus is. Like,
Yeah.
I, for example, read Crime and Punishment like 10 or 12 years ago, and it blew my mind. I don't remember it very precisely in terms of scenes in it or dialogue or characters. Like, you read it last year and you were like, oh, I'm at this part. And I was like, I remember that vaguely. However, I remember extremely clearly how it made me feel. But I think that book, like, its primary aim is to make you feel a certain way, anxious mainly.
Yeah.
And so that's what I remember. So, like, in that case, I'd say the fact that I don't remember plot points is not at the detriment of the book, because it's not about the plot. Whereas if I were to not remember anything about Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, I'd be like, okay, it's all about the plot. So I feel like if I don't remember it, that's not great.
Yeah.
So it depends on the book as well and what it's trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, Dark Matter is a good example because I love that book, but I didn't remember a whole lot about it until I watched the adaptation on Apple TV
Same.
recently. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that, and I remember that, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was a great moment. And then,
Exactly the same. We were watching the adaptation and we were like, what happens now? I don't know. But I loved that book. I had a great time with it.
Yeah, but that book served its purpose. That book achieved exactly what it wanted to achieve.
it
And
did. Same with
that's
Recursion. Recursion was
Yeah.
excellent for me as well.
I actually think Recursion was better.
I do too.
It did more for me. It got me more like emotionally invested. I think it's a slightly better book. I think the latest one he did, Upgrade, is the one that slid the furthest, the quickest after I read it.
You're saying that Upgrade downgraded?
Upgrade downgraded the fastest.
I like that. Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that of the three, it's probably the weakest.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm definitely still going to read it. But it's good to have like realistic expectations going in to certain books, and I think that's another way that the book community helps is to you're getting a bunch of different perspectives, and even though you're still going to read the book, you kind of know going in that it may or may not work for you, and I think that's helpful.
Yeah, but also like, what mood are you in? What exactly do you want the book to do for you? I think Blake Crouch is ridiculously talented because he writes books that I can read in a few hours that are compelling. They're not crap. That's a skill. Like, that's a talent, It's not something that's the dialogue is going to make me roll my eyes. That's the big thing for me where I feel something is amateurish, is if the dialogue feels unnatural.
Right.
If it feels like two characters wouldn't actually say that to each other in a conversation. I don't necessarily find that with his stuff, even though, he'll have people just explaining the plot to each other, but like, crazy shit happens in his book, so people are gonna be talking about it, being like, did that really just happen? It feels more natural. But I think it's a skill in itself to write a book that is so trimmed to the point of there is no excess, that you can absolutely tear through it in no time at all. Gives you a little hit, a little bit of satisfaction. It's not terrible. That's a skillfully put together book.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just want that. And that's cool. That book served its purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think his books are really entertaining and thought-provoking. They bring up some interesting ideas, and I want to read some of his older stuff. I haven't read the Pines trilogy yet.
Yeah, I want to read that as well.
Yeah.
I want to read that because I'm far enough removed from the show. I watched the show when did that come out? Like 10, 12
10 years ago, something like that. Yeah, I watched it too. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been a long time since I watched that. I still remember the twist.
I do too. Yep.
No, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but I'd be curious now to go back to read the books.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the show. The second season wasn't quite as strong as the first one, but I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shame it didn't continue, but that happens with streaming services.
Yeah.
Mona Lisa says, I think there can be many reasons: age, experience, what's happening in our lives. Yeah, for sure. Can be a good or bad time in our life. Prose, character. Yeah, and that's the thing. What really drives you when you read a book, if you prefer characters over story. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another one, just your personal taste. I was going to say, speaking of TV shows and time travel and things that, this is actually finished. Did you ever watch Dark on Netflix?
Yes, that was such a great show.
So good.
Yeah. And I even watched it with the German subtitles. I'm like, the English subtitles, I should say, with the German.
Nice.
And it was magnificent. Now are you fluent in German, Yolanda?
Yeah.
Okay, so you didn't need the subtitles then.
Yeah, we watched it with subtitles for you.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah.
Dark was fantastic.
Oh, what a great show!
I would watch it again and again. It's excellent.
Same. Yeah, I'm actually I've been thinking about it lately. It's been on my mind. I'd like to rewatch it because I think it was just so satisfying that it was evident upon finishing it that they had really truly planned out those 3 seasons. It was never going to be more. It was never going to be less. And it's one full story. And what a great show.
It uses all the threads that it harkens back to things, and it brings stuff from the past back to the present. And everything it's constantly commenting on itself and bringing plot threads from season 1 back to where we are now. It's just a very satisfying watch.
And don't they have the symbol of it, the 3 intersecting circles or something? And the show that's the structure of the show. It's the 3 seasons and they all overlap and bring it back together. What a great show. I was going to tell you to watch it if you haven't watched it.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites and one of my most memorable watches. Like I can still think back on that show and remember important characters and important moments. And it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch The Man in the High Castle on Amazon?
I didn't. Well, no. So I started the pilot episode and I enjoyed it, but for some reason I didn't go back and finish the series. I do want to though.
Mm-hmm.
And
I would say in a not the same vein as Dark, but in a similar sphere, it is equally kind of compelling, gripping, mind-bending.
Yeah. I don't think they quite knew what they were gonna do.
Yeah.
And because the end, I was a bit like, okay. Didn't love it, but it's a kind of show where it doesn't really matter. It's about the actual, like, show itself.
Right.
It
I
really very different from the book, I've heard.
I've heard that as well. Yeah, and I've heard it's different in a good way.
Yeah.
I have been curious to read the book, but I might just stick with watching the show on that one. The premise really gripped me because, I know it's basically that the Axis powers, or that, well, one of the two. Basically the Third Reich
Yeah.
wins the war, and
Yeah.
America is set up under that regime, and yeah, it's a fascinating concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even just purely for, honestly, for the set design and the costume design of like reimagining the 60s with like how would it have evolved, how would society have evolved, and then merging the aesthetic of the 1960s with like 30s fascism. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
so well done. I think the costume department and the set design is amazing on that show.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's like the West Coast. I think there's sections in San Francisco or something
Yeah.
that is Japanese occupied, and then
Okay.
the rest of the states
It's like the West is Japanese and the East is German.
German. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the Yakuza are in San Francisco, and like it's really
Wow.
it's really interesting, even just like mind exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good show. It's a good show.
Oh, that's cool. We've been watching Warrior. Have you guys watched that at all?
I haven't. I've heard of it though.
Yeah, it's based on an original concept created by Bruce Lee. It takes place in 1880 San Francisco, with the Irish and uh, uh, Chinatown.
Yeah.
Chinatown's growing influence, and all the the Chinese mobs and everything, and it's a fascinating story. And it's actually, so the original story that Bruce Lee created was what later became Kung Fu, the show, the TV show with
Right.
David Carradine. But of course they bastardized it. They didn't want Chinese characters, so they hired the white guy and everything.
Yeah.
And now Shannon Lee, his daughter, championed this new series that was more faithful to his
Okay.
original
Right.
ideas
Yeah.
and stuff. And
Which
so
streamer is that on? Is that on a streamer? Or?
you can watch it on either HBO or on Netflix.
Cool.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's got 3 seasons. They were eventually hoping to have a 4th season, but I think Netflix is the controlling property, and they canceled it.
Of course they
Of
did.
course they did. Why do
So
they keep doing that?
it originally aired on Cinemax, and then Cinemax canceled it after the 3rd season, and then Netflix picked it up with the intention to do a 4th season, but now they've canceled it as well. So yeah,
Maybe someday they will.
it's really great though. It's fantastic. Some great acting, great character work. Yeah, I highly recommend it.
Cool.
We're on season 3 right now. We just watched the first episode last night, so I haven't finished the series to know if it just drops you at the end or not. But
Right.
it's been satisfying so far.
Nice.
We've been working our way through Succession. So like on this side of the pond, we actually don't have HBO Max yet. It's not available.
Okay.
So there's a broadcaster in the UK and Ireland that has the rights to all the HBO stuff, all the Warner Brothers stuff, and that streamer is ridiculously expensive.
Oh my!
It's like €35 a month or something. Yeah. But a few months ago, I got a deal. Like, so if you cancel your subscription, well, every couple of months they do this deal that you get a portion of of their overall package for like €6 a month. And I always choose the series package, so the TV show package, basically, because they group it with TV shows, movies, and sport. So you can watch sports channels as well. And I think the movies and the shows are one package, and that's like 35 whatever. And then the sports is ridiculous. But anyway, I got a deal to just pick the TV shows, so get all the HBO shows on the streamer for like €6 a month for 6 months, and I have it till the end of the year, and then I'm gonna cancel it, and I'm gonna get another deal. So yeah, we've been working through Succession just because we can watch that now.
Cool. Yeah.
That's really good.
I've heard it's a good show. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very, very good.
Fits into the theme of being angry at capitalism.
And rich people, yeah.
It just fuels that a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does, yeah.
But it's ultimately a family drama. That's what that show is. They're just spoiled rich people, but it's a family drama, and it's very well written. It's very well acted. I think honestly, the
acting is the best thing.
The best thing is the acting. Some of they're incredible. Just the delivery of some of the lines is amazing.
Yeah, I've heard it's an excellent show. One of these days, I may get around to it. I've got a whole list of shows that I still need to to get to. I've been working through what's the name of it now? I lost it. True Detective.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
That's a really good one. And
True Detective is good.
Yeah.
One for the sci-fi fans. I think my favorite show currently running on TV is For All Mankind.
Oh, I've heard about that one. Yeah, I've not seen it yet.
So good.
Yeah.
Very, very good. If you like The Expanse, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like alternate history about the space race in the 60s. But it extrapolates upon that, and it takes it in. You know, each season is the next decade. I think there's 4 seasons out at the moment.
They're gonna do 7, so it's planned.
Yeah.
But it's essentially, it starts out as, on the first episode, what if the Soviet Union made it to the moon first?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And the answer to that is basically the space race never ends. So by season 4, we're in the early 2000s, and it's just like, look where we could be if the funding had just continued that way. But because there's a 10-year time jump with every season, it's constantly reinventing itself.
Yeah.
And it never lets up. Like it has been consistently, I think it's out of currently airing shows that we've watched, probably the most consistently.
Oh, it's the most consistent. It's
great one.
It's also just great in every aspect for me. Like, I think the writing is great, the casting, the acting, the directing, the costume, the music, the production, everything is ticking.
It's great. It's great.
Oh, that's fantastic. It definitely sounds right up my alley. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think you'd enjoy it.
Yeah. Jenny suggests trying The Strain. It's based on a book by Guillermo del Toro, and I've not read the book yet. But yeah, once I read the book eventually, because I really like del Toro, I'm finding. So I'll probably watch the show after that. Yeah. Have you guys watched or anything by del Toro?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorites. Did you watch Cabinet of Curiosities on Netflix?
Yeah.
Oh, we did.
Yeah. That show messed me up with several of the episodes. I'm like,
very disturbing.
What the hell I just watched?
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially his version of the Pikmin model, I think it was. by Lovecraft. Uh, he did one on the Pickman model. That I mean, the story by Lovecraft initially messed me up, and then watching it on that show, I'm like, okay, I need a break.
Yeah. Del Toro does like disturbing, eerily creepy stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, he
Yeah.
does.
yeah.
Yeah, he's very good at that.
He is very, very good. Yeah. So I'm definitely gonna have to check out more of his stuff. I recently read the Boy in the Iron Box series with him and Chuck Hogan.
Hmm.
And it's just it's a serial novel. Six different. It's written in six different parts,
Right.
and yeah, it's creepy for sure. So
You're currently reading a very disturbing horror book.
Yeah, I'm reading The Troop by Nick Cutter.
oh, I've heard about him. Yeah,
So I haven't read a lot of horror. I've read a few Stephen King books over the years, and like maybe a handful of other horror authors here and there, none of which have really worked for me. I've enjoyed some of the Stephen King. Like Stephen King is hit or miss for me.
yeah.
Even
For
like I
me
know he's
too.
hit or miss for a lot of people. So but even his big ones, like I love The Shining, and then It, I was like, I don't know, which I feel like some people would crucify me for. But anyway, so haven't read a whole lot of horror. And there are horror movies that have really gotten under my skin. But books, there has yet to be a horror book that made me feel that way. And I'd heard about The Troop, and I'd heard that it had some elements of body horror, and I was like, okay, I think this might do it for me. And I picked it up a couple of days ago. I'm actually almost finished. I have like 80 pages left. It's great.
Yeah.
It's really unsettling and disturbing, and it's tapping into some stuff that I'm like, about halfway through or 2/3 through, I started to get to a point where I can't read too much of it in one go, because every once in a while, like what you were just saying, like I need to take a break and just like go look at something nice. I'm gonna go pet a
Right.
Or
cat.
touch grass.
Yeah, but it's good. It's just it feels like a thriller, um, but it's a horror thriller, I'd say. So it's
Okay.
very fast moving plot wise. So it's very very engaging, and it's difficult to put down. You don't want to put it down, and you also feel like you can't keep going. So it's a cool, yeah. I'm really really enjoying it. It's a very unsettling, disturbing book.
Well, that's good to know. I've heard good things about Nick Cutter. Somebody else was talking about his novel. I think it's called The Deep
Yeah,
Hmm.
the other day, and I've been curious to try it out.
that's like sci-fi horror, right?
I think.
I've heard.
Yeah, and I don't know about sci-fi horror. Like I really love the Alien franchise.
Hmm.
Those are some of my favorite movies, but then others like Event Horizon seriously messed me up. That movie was just a freak show, and I'm in a good way. But I'm like, by the end of it, I was like, oh man, what did I just watch? Um, but yeah, I do want to branch out because I've become a huge fan of Clive Barker. Like the Hellbound Heart is amazing, and so I definitely want to read more horror. And I'm reading The Shining right now, actually,
Oh,
and I
nice.
I absolutely love it. Salem's Lot is my favorite Stephen King that I've read so far. The Shining is probably going to be pretty close to it, although I think Salem's Lot still may be my favorite. But I'm really enjoying The Shining, and
Cool.
I love the Dark Tower series. But then
Hmm.
I feel the same way about it, Yolanda. You're not
Oh,
alone.
thank
I
you.
was I was not a fan of it. I almost DNF'd it until somebody told me I should pick up the audiobook, and I did, and then I eventually made it through, and I wasn't really happy that I made it through. I was like, I think the movie is way better,
I
and
agree.
I
Yeah.
don't think that Stephen King writes really good long books. I think the book was just too long to start.
It was. I
And I
thought
felt the
that,
same about The Stand.
Right.
yeah, I haven't read The Stand, and I'm skeptical because it's so long. And yeah, my experience with long Stephen King, I'm like, I don't know. I feel
Be
like,
skeptical, Yolanda. Be
okay.
skeptical. I can't talk. Be skeptical, Yolanda. I can't talk all of a sudden. But yeah. Keep your skepticism handy for that book.
Yeah, I
It's
might not do that. I don't need to read The Stand. I think if I read another long Stephen King, it'll be 11/22/63.
Okay.
yeah, but even at that, that's not
And
his longest. Yeah.
nowhere close to The Stand. Yeah.
But I think with it is another book that I read a really long time ago, maybe when I was 13 or 14, that my brain did not register all of the weirdness that happens in that book that doesn't fit. My memory of that book is the kids' early chapters. That's my memory of that book, and I really enjoy that. So in my brain, I'm like, yeah, I like it.
That stuff is really good because I remember when I was reading it and I was saying to you, like, what is happening here? And you were like, I have no memory of that.
Yeah, not a clue.
Yeah.
But I think my favorite Stephen King is still Pet Sematary. Like if you outside of the horror Stephen King, probably The Green Mile.
Okay. That's cool. I've heard The Green Mile is good. Yeah, I never saw the movie either.
You got to watch the movie too.
And
That's
I
kind of
am
terrible.
interested to read one of his other chunky books, and that's Needful Things.
Okay, yeah.
But the chunkiness of it does detract me because of my prior experience with his long books. But
Yeah.
we'll see. I love the miniseries of Needful Things that I saw on TV way back in the day with Max von Sydow, I think, played the shopkeeper, and and he was brilliant. So one of these days I may give that one a jingle, but I don't know. Yeah, he's definitely hit or miss for me too. So you're not alone.
I'm glad. Like sometimes he's hit or miss within the same book. Like he has chapters and parts where I'm like, this is amazing, and then suddenly it takes a left turn, and I'm like, Stephen,
what are you actually writing?
What are you doing?
Yeah. There were a couple of moments like that in the Dark Tower series. Like a couple of the books got really meta all of a sudden. Like, it just got to a point where I'm like, okay, am I reading a Stephen King book, or am I reading about Stephen King writing a Stephen King book? And I'm like, it was weird. It was good, but it was weird.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Yes, it can be. Yeah. James Herbert is great horror. Like reading a B movie. Okay. I've not heard of it. I want books similar to Event Horizon, but I can't seem to find any. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you there, Jenny. I have no idea.
I've been enjoying Stephen Graham Jones for horror lately. I think he's an interesting voice, perhaps a little more literary leaning if, prose and voice and, sort of commentary on the genre itself is your thing. If you just want kind of standard thrill horror, it's probably not going to be your thing because it's very stylized. But he's got a unique voice and style that I think is much needed in horror,
Yeah, that's good to know. I've heard mixed things about him, but a lot of people seem to like him.
Yeah, I think that kind of happens when somebody really goes for a style. It's gonna be a 50-50 split.
Yeah.
But honestly, when I hear things like that, it makes me more interested to read.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's fair. Yeah, that's a good point. Audiobooks are the only way I can get through most Stephen King. They are just too long to be scary. That's fair. Yeah, I ended up doing not only it on audiobook, but I also did The Stand on audiobook because, and I didn't even try the physical copy for that book because I'm like, I had to go to the audiobook for it, so I'm just going to go straight to the audiobook for The Stand. And yeah, it wasn't great for me.
How many hours is that audiobook?
Oh gosh, I think it was like it was at least like 70 or 80 hours. I
Oh
think,
my God.
something like that. Maybe a little bit less, but
Nah.
yeah, it was
That's
long. I've after I finished it and I did my review on it, somebody in the comments mentioned to me that his recommendation is to read the original version of The Stand as opposed to the author's edition, because he released an expanded version of it later, and that's the standard version now.
Yeah.
But I guess if you can find an original copy of it, it's about 300 pages less.
Well, that would be interesting.
See, it's the fact that it was already long, and then he was like, you know what? My editor was incorrect. Here's all the other stuff.
But even with that, you shave 300 pages off that book, it's still 1,000 pages.
Yeah.
It's just not necessary. That is not necessary.
Yeah. Nope, it really isn't. Yeah. I don't know if I can emotionally handle Pet Sematary. That's going to be a tough one.
That's very fair.
I've heard that on two levels, for parents and also for pet lovers.
Yeah.
It's just an emotional roller coaster, and I don't know if I'm prepared for that or not.
It's tough. I don't think I will ever really watch the movie adaptations. It's something that I was very prepared for it to be tough, so it was probably not as tough as I thought it was going to be, because I was so prepared for it when reading it and knowing what to expect. And I knew what the book was. So I really liked it. It's a very good horror novel. It's just a novel about grief, really. But I think I would struggle seeing it visually. That I don't think I want to do that. Yeah. So that's, yeah. I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It says that it is 45 hours and The Stand is 48 hours. I was way off apparently, but it felt
like 70 hours.
It felt like 70 or 80, I guess. But yeah. All I know is it took me a couple of months to get through it. And yeah. So, but my audiobook extravaganza for next year will be a reread of Lord of the Rings.
Oh, fun.
Nice.
Yeah, because Andy Serkis does the narration, and I'm all over that.
Yeah, he's excellent.
Yeah. So I'm excited to do that. I think I'm going to be going through that next year. And I think that's really the only audiobook plan I have. Pretty much everything else is going to be physical or ebook. But yeah, who knows? Maybe one of these days I will be ready for the spear to cut through water.
Yeah.
Maybe one of these days I'll be ready to. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny how much, and I love it too, but how much Evie absolutely loves that book and promotes it. She sends it to all her friends, and I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's so cool.
She sent it to us. We did not buy that book.
Yep.
Yeah. She loves that book more than most parents love their own children.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, there are some books that just hit you like that. That you're like, yeah, I know this person and this person and this person that will absolutely love it, and I'm sending it to them right now.
Yeah, and then this other person, they might like it. I'm also going to send it to them.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And even if there's the slightest possibility that they'll like it, I'm sending it to them too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like barely a gift at that point. It's just like, you're reading this.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, here's another one for you, Yolanda. They feel a hell of a lot longer, and I listen to them at 2.5 speed.
Yeah, I don't think you're ever
This
going to
is
read
not
it.
giving you much hope, Yolanda.
Yeah, I think you've heard it here first. I'm never reading The Stand.
Oh, that's great. Well, we have been going on a little over 2 hours, and I'm loving it. By the way, I'm not trying to rush you guys off, but I know it's 9 p.m. where you're at. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
A little after
Yeah.
9, yeah.
So you guys are probably, I don't know what your bedtime is or anything like that, but you're probably ready to be done at this point. But I'll kind of leave it up to you how you guys feel.
I unfortunately have to work tomorrow.
Oh, okay. I
Um,
can relate to that. I will not keep you any longer.
Yeah, you're usually the one that goes to bed early, and since I guess work is also too much, that's just compounding the.
yeah, it's the last time. It's my last retail weekend this
Mhm.
weekend, which is fun. But this has been really, really fun. Thank you for
been
having us on. Great
great,
chat.
great to
It's been
finally talk to you. Yeah.
absolute joy having you guys on, and I am so glad we made it happen. And thank you to everyone that watched. Please make sure and check out StoryTube. They're as much of a joy to watch as they are to have live. So please check them out. And we'll end it there until I see you next time. Read more books.
Read more books.